This is Power Hour with Gabriella Power.
Hello and welcome to Power Hour. I'm Gabriella Power. Thank you for joining us. Well, the sick and dangerous attacks against Tesla are not stopping. In fact, they appear to be getting worse. After a surge of attacks that include cars being defaced and Tesla chargers being set on fire, today bombs have been found inside a Tesla showroom. And should we even be surprised, seeing as we've been seeing these horrific acts of violence be so widely celebrated by the left? And now today, police in Austin, Texas found devices which the bomb squad is dealing with. No matter how far this violence goes, it seems nothing will be considered too far for the Democrats to finally be able to denounce what this is, domestic terrorism. Because disturbingly, they know that this is the reaction from the left when they see these violent attacks being carried out.
They're taking to the streets or the parking lots.
Tonight, the FBI and ATF now investigating multiple cases of possible arson targeting Teslas and Cybertrucks.
This dramatic video shows multiple cars in flames. Police say the attacker used Molotov cocktails. It's the latest in more than a dozen instances of arson and vandalism targeting Tesla.
The same suspect shot more Teslas with a gun. Tesla Cybertrucks were set on fire in Kansas City, and earlier this month, shots fired at a Tesla dealership in Oregon. Cybertrucks on fire in Seattle.
Wow, you guys like petty acts of domestic terrorism, huh?
That was the actual reaction from the audience on The Daily Show last week. Such sick stuff. And over the weekend, we saw more people take to the streets protesting against Elon Musk because how dare he attempt to get rid of waste, abuse and corruption in the government and try to save the country from going bankrupt. These people are crazy. There's someone with a sign claiming that Elon is stealing your money. He's actually running DOGE for free. I mean, these people are so delusional, they're not interested in facts or the truth. But as we know, it's not just those protests that we've been seeing, it's violence. And now reports that bombs have been found. They're so disturbing, and I have no doubt that people on the left are celebrating it as some sort of win. Well, the FBI is launching a task force to nail the criminals setting fire to Tesla cars. So far, the Bureau has received reports of 48 instances this month, 48 related to the attacks against Tesla. The FBI is treating the attacks as domestic terrorism and tracking people who threaten to carry out vandalism on the electric vehicle company as part of some sort of revenge plot against Elon Musk and DOGE. But what seems to be happening here is people on the left have spent so much time attacking Trump for several years, claiming that he's Hitler. Elon is a new Trump for these sick people. They have to attack him and his company that employs more than 100,000 Americans because he's trying to save the country from going bankrupt. And the perfect example of this is if you listen to the twisted messaging from failed vice presidential candidate Tim Walz. Here he is during the election campaign suggesting that Trump's a Nazi.
Donald Trump has descended into madness over the last few weeks. And I think some of you don't miss on this. Go do your Google on this. Donald Trump's got this big rally going at Madison Square Garden. There's a direct parallel to a big rally that happened in the mid-1930s at Madison Square Garden. And don't think that he doesn't know for 1 second exactly what they're doing.
How is anyone still listening to him? But now Donald Trump is in power again, and people on the left just don't want to admit that the Democrats' entire campaign last year was based on smears and lies. And Tim Walz and the left, well, they've moved right along to attacking Elon Musk. Last week, we saw Tim Walz get up on stage and go on a deranged rant about how happy and excited he gets when he sees Tesla stocks fall. Well, it's not a good day for Tim Walz or any one of those Democrats who attended the protests over the weekend because Tesla stocks have surged, going up 11% in a single day, which is the largest single-day move of the year for the company. And Tesla shares are now up more than 20% since Tim Walz went on his rant. Joining us now is Josh Hammer, Senior Editor-at-Large at Newsweek. Josh, thank you for joining us. I want to talk to you about DOGE. We are just seeing the ugliest attacks against Elon Musk, and it's amazing to see what people are actually protesting against. Today, Elon gave another example of what DOGE has been finding, and that includes $330 million in SBA loans to children under 11, including a 9-month-old baby who received a $100,000 loan.
A clear case of fraud was with the Small Business Administration, where they were handing out loans, $330 million worth of loans to people under the age of 11. I think the youngest, Kelly, was a 9-month-old who got a $100,000 loan. That's a very precocious baby we're talking about here.
How dare DOGE expose this? I suppose this is what the left want to see more of.
Yeah, I mean, just giving away money, you know, as if it's just like a piece of paper or a pencil or some sort of widget to give away. I mean, what could possibly go wrong here? I mean, on the one hand, it's really just darkly hilarious, isn't it? I mean, that this is the kind of thing that's been going on for God knows how long. I mean, who knows when these programs even started? Was it Joe Biden? Was it Barack Obama? Was it sometime even further in the past there? On the other hand, it really does underscore just how utterly inane and frankly perverse the dramatic, massive left-wing opposition to Elon Musk is. I mean, the people that are opposing the Trump administration more generally, Gabriella, whether it's things like this, whether it's the deportation of pro-Hamas miscreants like Mahmoud Khalil, I mean, what exactly are they standing for? I mean, are you guys actually making an affirmative positive stand to give away so-called loans to the tune of $330 million to people that are as young as 9 months? Are you actually taking an affirmative stand to actually keep Hamas supporters in the United States? I mean, what does it say about the modern left that they are forced to take these stances all in the purported name of just opposing whatever it is the Trump administration has to do? Because that's basically all they stand for at this point. They basically stand for whatever Trump does, and by extension, whatever Elon Musk does, we necessarily, by dint of that very fact, we will oppose it there. But that's left them defending some very, very, very indefensible things, I'm afraid.
Absolutely. I would like to see them defend something worthwhile. Let's talk about USIP. The Trump administration is gutting the institution of peace. So last week, bureaucrats held a tense standoff with a DOGE team that required police intervention. A White House spokesperson says that rogue bureaucrats will not be allowed to hold agencies hostage, and a judge agreed with this. District Judge Beryl Howell denied a request from the agency to grant a temporary restraining order that claimed that DOGE committed literal trespass and taking over by force. Now questions are being raised over what USIP could be trying to hide. USIP has around 300 employees, has a budget of $55 million a year. We know that it was established by Congress in 1984, and it claims that its mission is to prevent violent conflicts and broker peace deals abroad. This is, of course, despite the United States having been involved in numerous military interventions, prolonged wars, and the rising global instability in decades since then. It's hard to actually see what USIP has been able to achieve.
Well, it's funny that they only have a budget of $55 million or whatever the exact number is, because if you actually drive by the U.S. Institute for Peace, and I've driven by it any number of times, it's located right on Constitution Avenue. It's literally right off the National Mall. So if you've been a tourist in Washington, D.C., you're driving down Constitution Avenue, you're driving down Main Justice and the Federal Reserve, and then you see this mysterious building, U.S. Institute of Peace. What in the world is this there? And it turns out that this, like so many other alphabet soup agencies or alphabet soup NGOs that are funded by the taxpayer in Washington, D.C., it's just a bunch of deep state career leftist bureaucrats. That's basically all that's going on here, it turns out, at the U.S. Institute of Peace there. By the way, the judge who actually ruled against the USIP employees there and ruled in favor of Elon Musk and DOGE, Beryl Howell, total left-wing judge, absolute far-left judge there. I suppose a broken clock, after all, is still correct twice a day there, but it says just how it speaks volumes about how just meritless, frankly, the USIP's lawsuit was against Elon Musk and DOGE here for trying to gut out a lot of the fat in this taxpayer-subsidized adjunct of the federal government. It's not really an agency. It's not really independent. It's kind of just an appurtenance, you might say, of the federal government. But the federal government, it turns out, has a lot of appurtenances, to use the same word there. That's kind of what Donald Trump was elected to do, by the way. He was elected to drain the swamp. I mean, what did the people out there think that drain the swamp meant? I mean, did y'all think that it was just a bunch of mean tweets? I mean, it's time to actually drain the swamp in action. That's literally the whole point of the Department of Government Efficiency. It's the whole point point of what Elon Musk is doing there. Apparently, he's staying awake till 1 a.m. every night. He's sleeping in his office there. The world's wealthiest man is committed to this. He is committed to gutting out waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government. The American people are on his side. American people, roughly 65 to 70% approval ratings, say that they like what DOGE and Elon Musk are doing there. It is slush funds. It is taxpayer-subsidized career leftist bureaucrats slush funds like the USIP that are on the wrong side of the American voter. And yet again, Gabriella, we see that the left is forced to defend a fairly indefensible position, a position, mind you, that, as I just said, even a very left-wing judge like Beryl Howell actually ruled against.
I want to talk to you about accused pro-Hamas supporter Mahmoud Khalil, who you mentioned earlier. We're learning more about him, this detained Columbia University protester. The New York Post is reporting today that he hid his ties to UNRWA on his visa application. As we know, UNRWA was rightfully stripped of tens of millions of dollars in federal funding after it was revealed that several staff members took part in the October 7 terror attack on Israel. So over the weekend, lawyers for the DOJ lodged new accusations against the anti-Israel campus protest leader in court papers, arguing that they should be grounds for deportation. What's your reaction to this?
Well, if you are lying on a U.S. visa application, period, full stop, end of story, that is sufficient grounds to deport you. Frankly, you actually don't even need that. I mean, that is actually above and beyond what is required under our law in order to deport someone. You know, the Mahmoud Khalil story, I sometimes find myself just kind of pinch myself to make sure that we're actually really debating this. This guy is a genuine apologist for Hamas. This is a guy who has praised armed resistance, aka violent jihad, against the Jewish people, against the Jewish state of Israel there. This is someone who was one of the student leaders of the vandalism, the anarchy at Hamilton Hall at Columbia University last year. He was one of the student negotiators there. This is someone who has been closely involved with CUAD, Columbia University Apartheid Divest, a student organization that literally puts on their social media feed, "We seek to eradicate Western civilization." Well, okay, thanks for telling us there. If you're here in a visa, bye-bye. Look, there is an unbroken string of U.S. immigration law going back since the origins of the Republic, going back 250 years, that it is inherent in the principle of national sovereignty that any alien, whether legal or illegal, can be removed at any time for any reason. There is no such thing as quote-unquote due process when it comes to aliens. This is a key point, actually. It was Justice Robert Jackson, one of the great 20th century Supreme Court justices, in a 1953 case called Shaughnessy, who famously said that due process does not entail any alien around the world with the right to immigrate here against our will. And then once you are here, you don't have a due process right to be safeguarded from removal against the national will. It's a very fancy way of saying that once you're here, if we, the people who are the sovereign here in the United States, if we don't want you here, you're out. That's basically how it works. So the fact that he's lying on his visa paperwork there is additional grounds under the relevant statute, the Immigration and Nationality Act, to deport him. Frankly, as a matter of constitutional law, you don't even need him there. But again, as we were saying earlier, what does it say about the American left and the corporate media here, the chattering class, the commentary, that they are forced to defend this utter miscreant there? This is not just an 80-20 issue, Gabriella. This is probably closer to a 90-10 or a 95-5 issue. The American people want miscreants like this jihadist thug gone, and God willing, gone he shall be.
Well, we're sadly seeing more anti-Israel protests here in Australia. In Melbourne over the weekend, there were more anti-Israel demonstrations held, and they were as vile as ever. Protesters were caught on camera chanting, "All Zionists are terrorists," as they marched through the city. Just absolutely horrific scenes. Josh, what's your response?
Well, unfortunately, this has been pretty common since October 7th, 2023, and it's probably not going to end any time tomorrow. Look, one of the things, Gabriella, that I call for, I actually have a brand new book on this. You and I discussed this last time, called Israel and Civilization, The Fate of the Jewish Nation and the Destiny of the West. And one of the things that I urge all of Israel's supporters and friends all throughout the world, Jews, Christians, frankly, even pro-Israel Muslims, whatever you are there, you have to make the case for Israel in moralistic argumentation. For far too much of my lifetime, Gabriella, I've seen the nominal pro-Israel side speak in very kind of mundane, really kind of watered down terms. They just say, we just want to exist, or we just want peace, or we just want two states. And then a lot of very young, impressionable people there, frankly, a lot of kind of less religious people who don't otherwise have meaning in their lives and are looking for something to fill that vacuum of meaning there. They're naturally attracted to the quote unquote pro-Palestinian side because they actually present a moral argumentation. Now, it's very immoral, but they at least speak in moral terminology when they speak of things like occupation or things like Nakba, which is their way of referring to Israel's righteous war for independence in 1948 there. They're making morally charged terms. And my call in the book and just in my general commentary for a long time now has been, for the pro-Israel side, you guys have to make morally charged argumentation as well. Talk about going back thousands and thousands of years, how the Jews are actually indigenous to this particular land there. The Jews were in the land of Israel for literally thousands of years before there was a single, before Islam was created as a religion there. More so than that there, just make the straightforward case that whether it's Australia, whether it's the United States, or whether it's any other Western or Western-style country there, the West is stronger when there is an emboldened and empowered Israel there that is able, in an unfettered fashion, to take care of its own neighborhood and to secure and patrol it in a way that redounds to Western civilization's interests. There is no compelling national interest whatsoever for a country like the United States or Australia to support a quote-unquote two-state solution, which means carving up a new Muslim terrorist state in the heart of the Middle East. They'll become a new Iranian launching pad for terrorist attacks. There's no national interest in that whatsoever there. So whether it's explaining that in concrete terms, whether it's making an actual moral argument about the inherent beauty actually of Zionism, a term that has been so utterly ridiculed in recent years for garbage reasons, it's nothing less than the Jewish people's right to self-determination in their own ancestral homeland. It's a very straightforward, I would argue, beautiful concept. So make these arguments, though. Don't just let these other guys, these thugs, just take over the streets and then get away with their narrative. It's time for the pro-Israel side to step up and start waging their own loud arguments that are not obnoxious, but they have the benefit of being grounded in truth.
Israel's military is expanding its ground operation across the Gaza Strip, and the Defence Ministry says that it has killed Hamas's new Prime Minister in a precise strike. Now, this, of course, comes as talks to stop the fighting and release the hostages completely stalled. At least, Josh, we are seeing Hamas, it's continued to be weakened.
Yeah, the next time Hamas advertised for its prime minister job, they probably should put in the job description, unclear of how long the job duration is, right? I mean, they've cycled through a bunch of these guys ever since October 7th there. Hamas only has itself to blame, Gabriella, yet again, for the fact that its leaders are being killed. Hamas only has itself to blame, period, full stop, end of story, for the entire state of Gaza since October 7th. They were the ones who slaughtered 1,200 Israelis on that day. They were the ones who took hundreds of civilians hostage. Every single innocent person who has died, every single person is solely morally attributable and indeed attributable in the international laws of armed conflict to Hamas there. So they could have easily extended this ceasefire, though. If they had actually just agreed to the terms that Israel and the United States under Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, they had terms that they could have easily agreed to, such very basic things as, give back the hostages, that you absolute monsters, you human scumbags have been hiding in your terror tunnels, have been tormenting, have been just generally acting against humanity in the most core vicious way for the past year and a half there. Hamas had every opportunity to extend the ceasefire. They have refused to do so, and God willing, they will reap the rewards of it. The key question, Gabrielle, is whether or not Prime Minister Netanyahu and the IDF are actually prepared to finish the job this time. That is really the key question. I don't think that the Israelis have any other choice but to finish the job. They announced at the onset of this war that the eradication of Hamas was a war aim. Anything less than that will therefore be a failed war effort. So I think that they have no choice but to finish this conflict. The good news as an American is that it seems like Donald Trump fully supports that goal as well.
It is. Trump's administration firmly stands with Israel, and we like to see it. But I want to talk about what is going on in the United States, talking about politics. The younger generation is becoming more conservative. We saw in the election last year, it was a political earthquake. It was the young people who went from being the most progressive to the most conservative in really a short period of time. Here's this analysis on a New York Times podcast.
But if you look at this chart among white men who were 75 years old, supported Kamala Harris at a significantly higher rate than white men who are 20 years old.
That's exactly right.
That's a real shift.
It is a real shift. This is the thing I am the most shocked by, I think, in the last 4 years, is that young people have gone from being the most progressive generation since the baby boomers, and maybe in some ways more so, to becoming potentially the most conservative.
So Democrats are getting destroyed now among young voters.
That's right.
Josh, what do you put this down to? Are younger people becoming more conservative, or is it just that the left has just gone far too extreme?
Well, I think that there are two things here. One is that young people in America have grown up in the shadow of a lot of failures, unfortunately. They've grown up in the shadow of multiple failed wars overseas, whether it's Iraq or Afghanistan. They've grown up in the shadow of an ever-escalating and skyrocketing national debt. Perhaps more so than anything else, the people who have just turned 18 here, those who are in the 18-25 demographic, they partially came of age during the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, they came of age at a time when Anthony Fauci and public authorities here were basically telling you to not leave your house for months or years on end there. If, God forbid, you wanted to take your child to the local park, you could get a violation there. How dare you ever consider going out in public if you're not triple masked, and on and on and on there. COVID-19 was one of the most debilitating episodes in all of modern human history, especially here in the United States when it comes to leading to decreased public trust there. So I think part of this just visceral response to lack of trust is being taken out on the Democratic Party, because they are rightly perceived right now in America's two-party system as the party of institutionalism, as the party that controls the institutions here, whether it's academia, whether it's the media, whether it's the public health authorities there. So they're naturally going to the more counter-institutional, counter-establishment party, which at this time is the Republican Party, especially under Donald Trump. I think that's half it there. The other half of it is that Donald Trump as an individual, just as a cultural icon there, is leading a cultural movement. The same way that Barack Obama led a cultural movement back for impressionable teenagers and 20-somethings back in 2008. Back then, the slogan was hope and change. A lot of young people voted for the Obamas. We all remember that poster, the blue and red poster with kind of the faded image of Barack Obama there. Well, MAGA actually, in kind of a weird way, actually is the equivalent of that in this particular decade. Donald Trump is absolutely leading a movement. The red MAGA hat is basically the closest successor to that hope and change poster back from 2008 there. And the same way that Barack Obama was bigger than politics, but was really able to transcend popular culture, so too is Donald Trump bigger than politics, and he is 100% transcending and permeating himself all throughout American popular culture. Look at this past weekend. He attended the NCAA wrestling championship. He got a roaring applause. The wrestler, I believe from Oklahoma State, who won the national championship, went over to Donald Trump, gave him a big bear hug. Wherever he goes, whether he was at the Daytona 500, the first NASCAR race of the year, whether he went to the Army-Navy football game, wherever he goes here in the U.S., he is immediately embraced. He is applauded there. The whole Trump dance become kind of like a cultural icon here in sports, on television. I mean, he's transcended politics, which makes sense because he's been a global figure for the better part of his entire adult life, going back to the New York tabloids in the late 70s, early 80s. So he really has kind of become much, much, much bigger than just president of the United States. He is leading kind of a just broader societal movement. I think that is part of why young people are flocking to him as well.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Love seeing you do the Trump dance just then, Josh, as well. But finally, before I let you go, I didn't think we'd be agreeing with Bernie Sanders today, but he's actually making sense. He was asked about Donald Trump on ABC News and admitted that nobody thinks illegal immigration is a good thing.
Is there anything that you think Trump has done right?
Yeah, I mean, I think cracking down on fentanyl, making sure our borders are stronger. Look, nobody thinks that illegal immigration is appropriate.
Wasn't expecting that, but credit is, where credit is due. He's right.
You know, I think back to the 2016 Democratic presidential primary. So that was really three candidates. It was Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, and the former Governor of Maryland, Martin O'Malley. So back then, if memory serves, I think it was during this cycle. It was during a presidential primary debate that the topic of open borders came up. And Bernie Sanders dismissed it out of hand. He said, open borders, that's a Koch brothers concept. Because you got to understand, Gabriella, Bernie Sanders came of age at a time when to be on the left was to support a closed border for big labor reasons, for labor union reasons, for the AFL-CIO, for people like that. And Bernie Sanders, I mean, look at the guy. He's been around the block for a long time. This is someone who, at his core, is a socialist. That is what he cares for.
Yes.
He's not necessarily, at his core, a woke neo-Marxist. He's someone who really cares first and foremost about socialist economics there. So, he doesn't support cracking down on illegal immigration for law and order reasons. He doesn't care about it for sovereignty or nationalism reasons or anything like that there. He supports it in theory. I guess in theory, because in practice, I'd have to see what kind of legislation he would actually support, right? But in theory, I guess he's mouthing off rhetorically support for this because these are kind of his old socialist, closed border, hike the wages of the working class talking points going back to the 1960s. I'm not belittling that, by the way. I happen to also agree with trying to spike the wages of the working class there. I support a more restrictionist immigration paradigm as well there. But the goal or the point here is that this is kind of just an out of context moment for Bernie Sanders. It kind of exposes that he is of a fundamentally different generation. He's been replaced in many ways by the young culture warriors, the Ilhan Omars, the AOCs. But frankly, if Democrats actually want to get back to being somewhat relevant on a national level here in the United States, they need to ditch the culture war and get back to their old blue-collar economics. Even if I don't always agree with those economics, at least they're talking about the issues that matter there. Bernie Sanders, in a weird way, as crazy as he is kind of a throwback to that.
Josh Hammer, Senior Editor at Large at Newsweek, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Josh. So good to talk to you.
You too. Thank you so much, Gary. I'll take care.
Joining us now is Hilary Fordwich, President and founder of Strellmark. Hilary, thank you for joining us. I have to start with the news today that there has been a major security breach in the Trump administration after a journalist was added to an encrypted online chat with government officials. The Atlantic magazine's editor-in-chief, Jeffrey Goldberg, was included on a message chain in which top Trump administration officials, including J.D. Vance, Pete Hegseth and Mike Waltz, were discussing recent strikes against the Houthi terror group in Yemen. Now, a National Security Council spokesperson confirmed that the messages sent through the app Signal appear to be authentic. He said that they're investigating how the number was accidentally added to the chain, but it's pretty huge news. Can I get your reaction to this?
Well, good evening. And Gabrielle, pleasure to be back with you again. Thank you for having me. I think this is an absolutely ghastly gaffe. But we don't have any explanations from it yet. We don't know whether it's sabotage, but it's highly unusual for such a gaffe to take place from anybody who's loyal to the Trump administration. And so obviously this is somebody who doesn't want the Trump administration to succeed and actually probably doesn't want peace in the world. So we might speculate as to what sort of leanings that particular individual who, it's made this happen has. But right now we don't have any more facts, and I'd rather not speculate further than say it was a ghastly gaffe.
It's very concerning. Let's talk about Russia and Ukraine. US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff has downplayed concerns that a deal with Russia could embolden Putin. Speaking with Fox News, he says he doesn't see that Putin is someone who is trying to take over Europe. This is what he had to say.
I just don't see that he wants to take all of Europe. This is a much different situation than it was in World War II. In World War II, there was no NATO. So you have countries that are armed there. To me, it just does. I take him at his word in this sense. So, and I think the Europeans are beginning to come to that belief too.
The US is still hoping that a ceasefire in Russia's war with Ukraine can be reached within weeks, and the White House is aiming for a truce agreement by April 20. Hilary, what's your assessment of where this is at the moment? How likely is it that we could see a truce agreement by April 20?
Well, I think the very good news, Gabriella, and the whole world, and I can't imagine why anyone would think it's not beneficial to be at least talking. The previous administration didn't even. So you do need to have talks. You do need to be negotiating.
Absolutely.
You do need to have. Of course, yes. And I would say that, basically NATO and the West has broken their word ever since 1991 and keeps encroaching and moving and constantly breaking their word. I'm not in any way validating or in any way sort of saying that anything Putin's done is particularly correct or humane, but we must look at both sides of the story. And I think one of the very wise things Steve Witkoff said, he said in his 68 years of negotiating all sorts of deals and things, he said there's always two sides to a story. And that's what I'd say. I would actually, though, quote One of the things that Putin said many years ago, he said that he thought perestroika, which was the dismantling of the Soviet Union, he thought perestroika was one of the worst things that ever happened to Mother Russia. So he very much does want Russia as a whole. What is interesting, and I think the biggest question, Gabriella, that not many people are talking about is, how come there's this $1.2 billion ski resort being built by the Ukrainians? So it's a little bit strange. And the last but not least, billions is going from European countries, as we know, to the war. And the UK just actually approved billions. Meanwhile, pensioners are starving. The economy is tanking. It's absolutely amazing to come up with these billions and sending potentially British boys to die.
Absolutely. Let's talk about investment in the United States. We're seeing more companies and countries investing in America as part of Trump's effort to bring manufacturing back. Today, South Korea-based Hyundai and Donald Trump announced a $20 billion investment in the US, onshoring, which includes a $5 billion steel plant in Louisiana. So since Trump took office on January 20, investments have totaled almost $3 trillion, which is a huge figure. I suppose is this latest one considered a win?
Yes, absolutely. It's a huge amount of money in just such a very short amount of time. What I would say is all of his policies are geared to, when he talks about America first, there's nothing wicked about wanting to reshore American companies. Actually, President Obama, when he raised the corporate tax rate to 21%, countries like, for example, Ireland, they lowered their corporate tax rate to 12%. What happened? Well, obviously, who says they want to pay 21% versus 12%? So 997 US companies, Gabriella, are now headquartered in Ireland. So they have all the money, they have all the jobs. Yes, what Donald Trump has done is he has enacted policies that have encouraged US companies to come back and reshore, and also, yes, for foreign investment. It's total $3 trillion so far. Watch for it to go higher.
And it's $3 trillion in such a short amount of time. It's going to be so interesting to watch what happens by the end of the year. Over in the UK, though, it is a totally different situation. The UK Labour government is accused of being anti-business, surprise, surprise. But GB News reports that more than 200,000 businesses have folded since Labour took power. That is a bleak picture for jobs and investment under the current government. What's your assessment?
Oh, absolutely, Gabriella. To my point just now about corporate tax rates. Well, corporate tax rates are one thing. What about individual tax rates as well? It's reported that every 45 minutes, a millionaire leaves the UK. Why wouldn't they? If you're going to have, if you're more of your money that you've made taken away from you. So I think that's absolutely a ghastly statistic. And yes, one of the things in the UK, by the way, the Labour government, I don't believe, and I could be wrong, but I don't even think one member of the Labour government has ever run a business. And I'm always saying in the US, Gabriella, that we should have a constitutional amendment that in order to have hold public office, you should have had to have made payroll and run a business so you understand where money comes from.
Wouldn't that be good?
Wouldn't that be lovely if politicians actually knew how to run a business? And I think that's back to tying all these stories together, back to the $3 trillion of reshoring. That is because there are business people running the government now. If you don't have and you don't make money, you have nothing to tax when you drive away businesses and taxes. So the Chancellor of the Exchequer over there, Rachel Reeves, that's what she's doing. She's absolutely driving away millionaires, driving away businesses. And you're absolutely right about the 203,000 businesses that have folded, and many more are actually leaving. Talks of many of them coming to the US.
Yes, they are. Finally, Hillary, I need to get your thoughts on Canada. Canada's new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, has called for a snap election scheduled for next month. So the move to dissolve Parliament comes during increased tensions with the US after Trump issued tariffs. This is what he had to say.
We are facing the most significant crisis of our lifetimes because of President Trump's unjustified trade actions and his threats to our sovereignty. Our response must be to build a strong economy and a more secure Canada. President Trump claims that Canada isn't a real country. He wants to break us so America can own us. We will not let that happen.
It's interesting, Mark Carney still hasn't had a phone call with Donald Trump, and that might not happen until after the election. What do you make of all this? It's interesting because Trump hasn't even mentioned Carney's name yet. Where's the relationship heading between Canada and the US?
Well, a few things here. Number one, it will be very interesting to see when the Canadian public are all very aware of the fact when he was at Brookfield Asset Management, he actually sent millions of Canadian dollars and thousands of Canadian jobs down to Manhattan, to New York, out of Canada to the US. I wonder why he did that. Gosh, that wasn't very Canadian. Really, was it? He also sent thousands of jobs down into the coal mining area with some other deals that he was involved in. So he was making money for other people and certainly not for Canadians. So hopefully a lot of that will become public. Another thing is that the election, of course, is on April 28th. He's actually called for the election, very interestingly, Gabriella, in the shortest amount of time that is allowed by law there. Why? I think it's 36 days. He called it within 37 days. Why? Because their polling right now has actually improved the Liberals. It was so bad that, of course, resigned. But why is it better? Because a lot of Canadians are hearing all that Trump is saying, and they're not getting quite the full story. Don't forget, all Trump is asking for is fair, reciprocal tariffs. They've been tariffing the US for that amount. So they're not seeing both sides of the story. And also, no, President Trump didn't say that Canada isn't a real country. What he did say, which is true, is they don't even pay for their own security. The US is paying for their security. What President Trump has said is that if they were part of the US, they would be more secure with a better economy and they'd all lead better lives. And those are actually all pretty true.
Hilary Fordwich, it is brilliant to speak with you. Thank you so much for joining us on Power Hour.
Brilliant to be with you too. Thank you, Gabriella.
Joining us now is the host of the To Die For Daily podcast, Kinsey Schofield. Kinsey, it's great to see you. We've got to talk about this new celebrity relationship that has been confirmed. Tiger Woods and Vanessa Trump, the ex-wife of Donald Trump Jr., they've confirmed their relationship after weeks of speculation. Tiger Woods was the one making it official, sharing photos to social media, and he captured the post, "Love is in the air and life is better with you by my side. We look forward to our journey through life together." Look, what's the reaction to all of this?
I mean, I think it's been fairly positive. Donald Trump absolutely worships Tiger Woods. I don't know if you remember, but in 2019, he awarded Woods the Presidential Medal of Freedom, which was for his sport, recognizing his contributions to the sport of golf and remarkable comeback and winning the Masters tournament that year. And I think that Donald Trump would actually love Tiger Woods being a member of the family, because Vanessa is still very much an honorable member of the family, like a daughter to Trump. So I think as long as he gets the Trump seal of approval, everybody else is going to be excited too.
Absolutely. Well, Joe Biden, he's been staying out past his 8 p.m. bedtime to turn out for a red carpet event. Joe Biden made his first post-inauguration appearance at the opening night of Othello on Broadway. Here he is. Joe Biden was joined by Jill Biden and former spokesperson Karine Jean-Pierre. Look, Kinsey, what can you tell us? Did he really make it through the opening night without falling asleep?
I mean, Weekend at Bernie's is what I just witnessed. I don't even know if he knew that he was in New York City. I mean, I imagine he closed his eyes a time or two. I didn't have eyeballs inside the theater, but I know that he was apparently disappointed because the newly appointed DNC chair, Ken Martin, Biden spoke to him and really kind of begged him to allow him to campaign, to fundraise for the Democratic Party, and did not get positive feedback in return. So the Bidens are really feeling alone on an island now because no one wants them engaged in anything involved in the political party going forward. So I guess he's going to have to resort to being an influencer like Meghan Markle. Poor Biden.
Good luck to him. Not sure how that's going to work. Let's talk about Snow White. It's on course to become Disney's worst performing live action remake. It opened in theatres with $43 million at the box office, which is not the figure that Disney was hoping for after splashing $250 million on the film. What more can you tell us?
I can tell you that The Lion King made $191 million and Beauty and the Beast made $174 million. So this is giving Wipeout. And it's not just, I know that some people will say, don't listen to the online chatter, don't listen to the conservative chatter, but it's not just conservative chatter. On Rotten Tomatoes, where these are professional critics, it scored only 44%. So it's more than Rachel being woke. It's more than them changing the story too much. This is really a bad movie, and I apologize to Walt Disney himself. I'm sorry.
Do you think this result is just going to add questions over why Disney is doing this? What is with their strategy of remakes?
It's their strategy of remakes, and it's also casting people that they know are outspoken and highly political in a way that is going to alienate 50% of your audience. It's also disappointing because they're not gearing it towards these tiny families, and that's what built them to begin with. Focus on the audience that created you.
Let's talk about some royal news now. GB News is reporting that Prince Harry is reportedly set to be offered the chance to create a documentary series about his mother, Princess Diana, to mark the 30th anniversary of her death. So the 2- or 3-part series would be expected to be released in 2027, which would be 3 decades after Diana's tragic car crash in Paris in August 1997. From what we know about Prince Harry, he obviously likes deals. How do you expect this to go?
Well, I can tell you it would take, on my prediction, it would take Prince Harry 2 years to accomplish anything. But The Independent is reporting, and Harry and Meghan's camp have worked with The Independent before, that Prince Harry is not developing a documentary about the anniversary of his mother's death. But I wouldn't put it past Prince Harry, because I heard and reported similar stories years ago. And there's this real tug of war between Prince Harry and Prince William for the legacy of his mother. So I do think that inevitably this will come to fruition, but I'm not sure if this particular report is 100% valid.
Okay, what about Princess Beatrice? She has opened up about her pregnancy journey after the premature birth of her second daughter, Athena. What has she had to say?
But she talked about how small her baby was and how frightening this was. You know, approximately 1 in 10 babies worldwide are born prematurely, and you might not even think about it until it happens to you. Preterm babies are at an increased risk for health problems like respiratory distress, cerebral palsy, and development delays. I think that this is an important and intimate message to hear from the princess. And I also appreciate the fact that she did it despite all the negativity surrounding her father. She said, you know what, this is too important. I'm going to have this conversation today.
And she deserves all the credit for that. Finally, with royal news and US news tied in there as well, Donald Trump has potentially suggested that the US could be joining the British Commonwealth with a post to Truth Social. The president shared an article from The Sun reporting that King Charles was going to make a secret offer to the White House and that plans are in the process for the US to become an associate member of the international organisation. Now, Trump shared it and wrote, "I love King Charles. Sounds good to me." Gosh, Donald Trump's iconic. You can just hear his voice, can't you? What more can you tell us about this one?
I can tell you it's frightening to me that Donald Trump is reading The Sun. No offense. I love them. But you would expect him to quote like the Wall Street Journal. But, you know, it would be largely symbolic. The offer is being seen as a way to bolster the U.S. and United Kingdom's special relationship. Obviously, I would be thrilled if we joined the Commonwealth because I feel like, you know, that gets me closer to the British royal family. So, no, I think that this would be really fun. I think that I see the value in it.
Kinsey Schofield, host of the To Die For Daily podcast. It is so good to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, over the weekend, the crowd went wild as President Trump walked out at the NCAA Wrestling Championship.
On tomorrow, so for me, I just really try to put focus on just keep getting better, scoring points.
The President of the United States, Donald Trump, in attendance tonight at the Wells Fargo Center.
Yeah, they absolutely love him. And that is Power Hour. Thank you for your company. Make sure you subscribe to Sky News Australia on YouTube.